Paul Heyman warns Jon Moxley script. Paul Heyman just cut the most personal, brutal promo of 2025, and if you think his warning to Jon Moxley about never being welcome back in WWE was just typical Heyman hyperbole, you completely missed the real message he was sending not just to Moxley, but to every wrestler who thinks they can leave WWE, trash the company, and waltz back whenever they feel like it. This wasn't your standard Paul Heyman promo where he's hyping a client or building a match. This was personal. This was vindictive. This was Paul Heyman using his platform on WWE programming to send a direct shot across the bow at Jon Moxley, who's currently the face of AEW's World Championship scene, and the wrestling world is absolutely losing their minds trying to figure out what prompted this, whether it's a work, a shoot, or something in between. Let me set the scene because the context matters. Paul Heyman's on SmackDown doing his usual wise man routine, talking about his current client and WWE's dominance in the wrestling industry. Standard stuff. But then, unprompted, Heyman shifts gears. His tone changes. The showmanship drops for a moment, and what comes next feels different from anything we've heard from him recently. You know, there are wrestlers who leave WWE thinking the grass is greener elsewhere. They burn bridges on their way out. They give interviews trashing this company, trashing the people who gave them opportunities, acting like they're too good for WWE. And then, when their little experiment doesn't pan out the way they hoped, they come crawling back expecting a hero's welcome. The crowd's buzzing because everyone immediately knows who he's talking about, even though he hasn't said the name yet. And then Heyman delivers the line that's now trending worldwide. Jon Moxley, if you're watching and I know you are because you can't help yourself, let me make something crystal clear, you're not welcome back in WWE. Not now. Not ever. You made your choice. You burned your bridge. And unlike some people, we don't forget. Here's my first question, is Paul Heyman speaking for WWE management, or is this personal beef between him and Moxley? Drop your theory in the comments. The immediate reaction was chaos. Social media exploded. Wrestling Twitter went into overdrive with people taking sides, creating conspiracy theories, and debating whether this is leading to something or if it's just Paul Heyman being Paul Heyman. But here's what makes this fascinating, Heyman doesn't just throw verbal bombs randomly. Everything he says serves a purpose, whether it's building a storyline, creating buzz, or settling real grievances under the guise of entertainment. Let's examine the history between Paul Heyman and Jon Moxley because it's complicated. When Jon was Dean Ambrose in WWE, he worked with Heyman during various storylines. They had that memorable feud where Ambrose was pursuing Heyman and Brock Lesnar. By most accounts, they had mutual respect for each other's work. But when Dean Ambrose left WWE in 2019 and became Jon Moxley in AEW, he gave several scathing interviews about his WWE experience. Moxley talked about creative frustration, about how WWE tried to script every word he said and control every aspect of his character. He talked about feeling like a cog in a machine rather than a valued performer. He specifically criticized WWE's creative process and implied that the company had lost touch with what makes wrestling compelling. Those comments didn't just criticize WWE, they criticized everyone associated with WWE's creative direction. Paul Heyman, as someone who's been a key creative voice in WWE at various points, probably took those comments personally even if Moxley wasn't directly targeting him. When someone says WWE's creative is broken, they're indirectly criticizing people like Heyman who've been part of that system. So there's history here, and it's not all sunshine and roses. Quick poll, if Jon Moxley's AEW contract expired tomorrow, should WWE sign him or stay away? Sound off below. Now let's talk about the reality of the situation. Jon Moxley is under contract with AEW. He's their world champion. He's the face of their company. The likelihood of him returning to WWE anytime soon is essentially zero. So why is Paul Heyman talking about him? Why issue this warning now? Theory 1, this is WWE's way of taking a shot at AEW. By having Heyman publicly say Moxley isn't welcome, WWE is essentially saying we don't need you, we're doing fine without you, and AEW can keep you. It's a power move designed to make WWE look strong and AEW's top guy look like damaged goods that WWE doesn't want back. Theory 2, this is setting up a future angle. Maybe Moxley's contract is closer to expiring than we think. Maybe there have been behind-the-scenes discussions about a potential return. Heyman issuing this warning could be the first step in a work storyline that eventually leads to Moxley shocking the world by returning to WWE. Wrestling companies love doing "they said I'd never be back" storylines. Theory 3, this is entirely personal and not sanctioned by WWE management. Maybe Heyman has real beef with Moxley and used his TV time to air grievances. WWE might not have approved this specifically, but they're not going to publicly contradict their on-screen talent either, so Heyman gets to speak his mind with corporate cover. Theory 4, this is about sending a message to current WWE roster members. By publicly burning the bridge with Moxley, Heyman, and by extension WWE, is warning everyone else, if you leave and trash us on your way out, don't expect to come back when things don't work out. It's about controlling the narrative and making examples. Real question, is it unprofessional for WWE to mention AEW talent by name, or is it just good wrestling heat? Let me know your stance. The wrestling community is divided on this, which makes it perfect fodder for debate. One camp thinks this is brilliant WWE being aggressive, not playing nice with competition, and creating buzz by being controversial. Wrestling is better when there's real tension between companies, and Heyman mentioning Moxley by name breaks the usual protocol of pretending AEW doesn't exist. The other camp thinks this is petty and beneath WWE. They're the industry leader with significantly higher revenue and viewership than AEW. Why are they taking shots at an AEW wrestler? It makes WWE look insecure, like they're threatened by Moxley's success outside their system. The argument is that WWE should focus on building their own stars rather than tearing down wrestlers from other companies. Both perspectives have merit. WWE being aggressive can create interesting storylines and generate mainstream attention, but it can also come across as petty, especially when directed at someone who left years ago and has clearly found success elsewhere. Let's analyze what Heyman said word by word because there are layers to this. "You're not welcome back in WWE" is straightforward rejection, but "not now, not ever" is permanent. That's not leaving the door open. That's slamming it shut, locking it, and throwing away the key. That language suggests this isn't about building to a return, this is about definitively closing that chapter. "You made your choice" acknowledges that Moxley chose to leave. WWE didn't fire him, he opted out. That's important because it frames Moxley as the one who walked away from opportunity, not as someone who was wronged. "You burned your bridge" references the interviews Moxley gave criticizing WWE. And we don't forget is a warning to everyone watching. WWE has a long memory. The phrase "unlike some people" is interesting because it's a dig at someone else. Who's Heyman referring to? Drew McIntyre left WWE, came back, and became world champion. Bobby Lashley left and returned to huge success. Christian left for TNA, came back, and had memorable runs. Is Heyman saying those people didn't burn bridges like Moxley did? Or is he being hypocritical? Who else do you think Paul Heyman was referencing with "unlike some people"? Drop your guesses in the comments. Jon Moxley's response to this will be fascinating to watch. He has several options. Option 1, ignore it completely. Don't acknowledge it, don't give WWE the satisfaction of knowing they got under his skin. Just keep being AEW's world champion and let his work speak for itself. This is probably the professional response. Option 2, fire back on AEW programming. Cut a promo responding to Heyman, defending his decision to leave WWE, and making it clear he has no interest in returning anyway. This escalates things and creates a legitimate WWE vs AEW tension that could be good for business. Option 3, respond on social media or in interviews. This keeps it somewhat contained while still addressing the issue. Moxley could use this as an opportunity to reiterate why he left WWE and why he's happier in AEW. Option 4, use humor to deflate the situation. Make fun of Heyman for being obsessed with him, joke about living rent-free in WWE's head, and turn the whole thing into content. This would be very Moxley. My prediction? Moxley probably ignores it publicly but references it subtly in his character work. He's good at incorporating real-life tensions into his performances without explicitly breaking kayfabe. He might cut promos about being free, about wrestling on his own terms, about not being controlled, all of which serve as indirect responses to Heyman without explicitly mentioning WWE. The business implications of this are significant. WWE publicly stating a wrestler isn't welcome could affect that wrestler's negotiating leverage if contracts ever came up for discussion. It could be posturing WWE saying this now so that if they do eventually bring Moxley back, they can claim he earned his return by proving himself or apologizing or whatever narrative they want to create. It also affects how other wrestlers view WWE as a potential employer. If WWE publicly burns bridges with former talent, does that make current roster members more hesitant to leave? Or does it reinforce the perception that WWE is vindictive and holds grudges? Depends on the wrestler's perspective. Should wrestlers be allowed to criticize former employers publicly, or should they stay professional? This is important. Share your opinion. AEW's response to this will be interesting too. Tony Khan could ignore it, taking the high road and not engaging with WWE shots. Or he could use this as ammunition, painting WWE as the evil empire that attacks wrestlers for having the courage to leave. AEW's branding has always been about being the alternative, the place where wrestlers have creative freedom. Heyman's comments play directly into that narrative. The media coverage of this has been extensive. Wrestling news sites are running with headlines about WWE banning Moxley, about Paul Heyman declaring war, about the tensions between companies escalating. This generates clicks, views, and attention, which is exactly what wrestling promotions want. In that sense, Heyman's comments are successful regardless of whether they lead anywhere. Mainstream sports media might pick this up too, especially if Moxley responds. WWE tells former champion he's banned forever is the kind of dramatic headline that gets attention beyond the wrestling bubble. It positions wrestling as having real drama and real stakes, not just predetermined outcomes. The precedent this sets is fascinating. WWE has usually maintained a policy of not acknowledging other wrestling companies by name on their programming. They certainly don't typically call out specific wrestlers under contract elsewhere. Heyman breaking that protocol, whether officially sanctioned or not, could open the door for more direct acknowledgments of wrestling existing outside WWE. That could be good for the industry. When WWE pretends they're the only game in town, it limits storytelling possibilities and makes wrestling feel smaller. When WWE acknowledges competition, even antagonistically, it makes the wrestling world feel bigger and more interconnected. Fans enjoy the meta-level drama of company vs. company as much as wrestler vs. wrestler. Rate Paul Heyman's promo on a scale of 1 to 10. Drop your rating in the comments. Let's address the elephant in the room. Could this lead to Jon Moxley actually returning to WWE someday? Contracts don't last forever. Relationships can be repaired. Money talks. If WWE offered Moxley an absurd amount of money, complete creative control, and a guaranteed main event spot, would he consider it? Moxley's always said he left WWE because of creative frustration, not money. He stated repeatedly that he's happier in AEW where he has more input into his character and storylines. But WWE is a different company now than when he left. Triple H running creative has changed the philosophy. Wrestlers seem to have more freedom. The product feels different. Could WWE and Moxley find common ground if they both wanted to? Absolutely. But Heyman's comments make that harder, not easier. By publicly burning the bridge, WWE either closes the door legitimately or creates an even bigger story if Moxley eventually returns despite these comments. The personal dynamic between Heyman and Moxley adds complexity. These are two guys who respect each other's work but might have genuine disagreements about wrestling philosophy and business decisions. Heyman's a WWE lifer who believes in the system. Moxley's someone who found that system suffocating and left to find creative fulfillment elsewhere. Those are fundamentally different worldviews that aren't easily reconciled. Paul Heyman's legacy as a promo guy is secure. He's one of the greatest talkers in wrestling history. But this promo might be remembered differently depending on what comes next. If nothing happens, if this is just a one-off shot at Moxley that leads nowhere, it'll be forgotten relatively quickly. If this is the beginning of something bigger, it'll be remembered as the spark that started a fire. Final question, will Jon Moxley ever return to WWE, or is he AEW for life? Share your prediction. Paul Heyman sending an explosive warning to Jon Moxley isn't just a random promo, it's a calculated message with multiple possible meanings. Whether it's personal beef, corporate posturing, storyline setup, or a warning to other wrestlers, it's created exactly what wrestling thrives on: conversation, debate, and uncertainty about what happens next. Jon Moxley isn't welcome in WWE according to Paul Heyman. But in wrestling, never say never. Bridges that appear burned today can be rebuilt tomorrow if the right circumstances align. The question is whether either side wants to build that bridge, or if this is truly the end of that chapter. What's certain is that Paul Heyman knows how to generate attention, Jon Moxley knows how to thrive as the outlaw figure, and the wrestling world benefits from having real tension and drama between companies and personalities. Whether this leads to something concrete or fades away, it's given us something to talk about. And in wrestling, sometimes that's the whole point.